Good evening and welcome virtually to the Hellenic-American Cultural Center and Museum of Oregon and Southwest Washington for this evening's event with Greek-American Olympic athlete, filmmaker, and writer Alexi Pappas. My name is Brandon Baker, and I serve as Executive Director of HACCM, and I am pleased to welcome you all as we hear from Ms. Pappas, interviewed by Maria Karamitsos, aka the WindyCity Greek. Tonight's event is supported by the generous contributions of people like you, who help HACCM pursue and fulfill our mission to gather, preserve, and share the Hellenic-American experience. You can support programs like tonight's interview by visiting Hellenic-Americancc.org/donate. Again, that's Hellenic-Americancc.org/donate. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest this evening. Alexi Pappas is an award-winning writer, filmmaker, and Olympic athlete. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Runner's World, Women's Running, Sports Illustrated, The Atlantic, and Outside Magazine, among other publications. And she has been profiled in New York Times, Sports Illustrated, New York Magazine, and Rolling Stone. Pappas co-wrote, co-directed, and starred in the feature film Tracktown, set in Eugene, Oregon, with Rachel Dratch and Andy Buckley. Most recently, she co-wrote and starred alongside Nick Kroll in Olympic Dreams, the first non-documentary style movie ever to be filmed at the Olympic Games. A Greek-American, Pappas holds the national Greek record for the 10,000 meters and competed for Greece in the 2016 Olympics. She lives in Los Angeles, California. Alexi's new book, Bravey, Chasing Dreams, Befriending Pain, and Other Big Ideas is out now from the Dial Press. And you can grab your copy of the book from our book-selling partner, Annie Bloom's Books, and at annieblooms.com or at a local bookseller near you. Alexi also apparently now serves as my fairy godmother voice to let me know when I'm on mute.
I'm always here for you. And I'm
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Now, Maria Karamitsos has been a positive voice in Greek media since 2002. She was the founder, publisher, and editor of WindyCity Greek magazine. For 10 years, she served as the associate editor and senior writer for the Greek Star newspaper. Her work has been published in Neo Magazine, Greek Circle Magazine, The National Herald, Greek Reporter, Harlot Sauce Radio, Women Who Write, KPHTH Magazine, Expat Athens, and more. You can visit her at mariakaramitsos.com. Welcome, Maria.
Uh-oh, she's on mute too.
You're on mute. We all did it. Well, Alexi gets
Kalispera, I know, I did it too.
Some of
all
us
right,
are
well, now you made me feel
all
better.
day,
I'm going to say you did it on purpose to make me feel better.
To all the people in the audience watching who do Zooms all day, you're like, this is.
Yeah, exactly. The pros are all watching and just shaking their heads at us.
Right, that's fine. That's fine.
Right. Well, before the interview starts, I do want to remind everybody tonight that we have the Q&A feature down below. If you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, there's a little icon there of two sort of speech bubbles. It says Q&A. You can put your questions in there, and that way they'll be there when Maria and Alexi are ready to answer them. You don't need to wait until they say we're going to go to Q&A. You can add those at any time, and they'll be ready when we're ready to launch into the Q&A. So with that, Maria, Alexi, take it away.
Okay, hello from Chicago, everyone. It's great that we can all be here from all different places virtually. Thank you to Brandon and the Hellenic-American Cultural Center and Museum for inviting me this evening, and to all of you, welcome. Tonight, I have the privilege to chat with Alexi Pappas about being Greek, competing for the Olympics, for Greece in the Olympics, and more. We're also going to talk about her new book, Bravey, Chasing Dreams, Befriending Pain, and Other Big Ideas, that dropped last week. So Brandon told you how this is going to work. Alexi and I are going to chat for a bit, and then you'll get a chance to ask her a question. So if something comes up, pop it in the chat box, and I'll read it to Alexi during the Q&A. Sound good? All right, grab a beverage, a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Alexi Pappas.
Thank
you. Yasu Alexia, τι κάνεις?
Καλά, see, I'm like laughing because it's, it's like a muscle when you don't use your Greek that you're like, oh, wake it up. I'm so happy to be here together. And I was saying, before, it would be so fun to be in Portland together because it's one of my favorite places in the whole world, or Chicago. I mean, I love where you are too. And it's still a privilege to be here together. And thank you for doing this with me.
Great. Well, it's so great to reconnect with you. We actually did an interview together back in early 2016, ahead of your return to Chicago to defend your title in the Shamrock Shuffle. And so much has happened since then. We're really so proud of you and to read about all of your accomplishments, especially because you're Greek. So tonight we're going to chat about being Greek and Greece and all of that. So you probably know what I'm going to ask you now, because it seems like the very first question Greeks ask when they meet. Where do you trace your Greek roots?
Yes, so my family is in Rhodos, and that's, my dad's side of the family, several generations back. And I've loved, being able to go there and see where my family grew up. And I haven't been there in a while, although I have been to Greece several times since. And I hope that I get to go back there and bring Jeremy, my now husband, because I've told him about the castle in Rhodes and all the cats running around, but he's never been.
So what was that like for you when you went to your ancestral island?
Yeah, well, I think that I think it's amazing when you meet family and spend time with them and learn, that you're both similar in your family and you also come from different kinds of growing up places. But I think honestly, my more impactful Greek experiences have been in the more recent, the more recent times that I've gone, and those have been for training camps. And those aren't in Rhodos; those are in, mostly mainland Greece. I did a camp in Karpanisi before the Rio Olympics, and that was really life-changing because it was the longest time I'd ever spent there. Honestly, it was like over a month, and I remember this moment where I was at the track and there were these little girls, they were like sisters playing on the side of the track, and their brothers presumably were playing soccer in the middle on the field, and I was doing a workout. And I had this feeling of like, wow, those girls look like they could be my sisters. And it felt really special because I don't feel that way all the time, and I don't have any sisters in real life. But two, they came up to me and asked me in Greece, like, why I look how I look. And I think they were referring to my big muscles and just what was I doing. And I realized that it's not every day that they might see somebody with these big, strong muscles, chasing boys around the track and keeping up with them. And so that, I think, was like the more impactful moment for me when I realized that I could be a role model there, and also that I had kind of, a familiar feeling being there. And it's only gotten more intense every time I've gone. And I know we might talk a little bit about my most recent trip there during COVID. I don't want to, assume,
Yeah.
but
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about that for sure. When we last caught up, you talked a little bit about your family. Your dad raised you and your brother by himself after your mom passed away when you were 4. I have 2 children, and my husband is with me every step of the way. And it's really hard with 2 parents. I think, let's hear it for your dad. Is your dad joining us tonight?
I hope so. I mean, yes, hello. I'm going to say hello to him because he might be one of those ones that watches it later. He's like, but maybe he's here. Even he has adjusted to this Zoom life in his remote work world. But yeah, he really is a superhero to me. And I think that comes across really strongly in my book, Bravey. And it was important to me because even though I grew up differently, I think, than some people, and not everything was perfect, I do feel like I am where I am because of the way I grew up. And that was so much thanks to him and his values. And, I think there's a lot of Greek culture in there, like food was really important. And there are little details about growing up that I think you feel his Greek roots in it. Like, for example, I don't know, whenever he cooked chicken, it was always a whole roast chicken. And I'm not saying that's like only a Greek thing, but I certainly was shocked when I went to college and there were these chicken breast patties, and I'd never seen a dismembered chicken because I'd only ever seen it whole. And it was a really strange experience. And I realized, he learned that from his mom, you know, my yaya, and just little things, you know, just little things that he, you know, used in his parenting.
You also mentioned your godmother as a strong Greek role model, and you also mentioned your yaya. Tell us about them.
Yeah, well, I wrote about this in the book too, but when I got my period for the first time, my dad just called his sister. And I think that was, you know, it was great. He had someone to call who could talk him through what he was supposed to do with me, what we were supposed to buy at the grocery store. And like, that's like the really, you know, those are like the lovely rough edges of growing up in this circumstance. And I think as far as my Yaya, who I always called just Yaya because I think that's just like what a child might call their Yaya. She was a strong force in my life and very, um, honestly, like a powerful presence. And I was so lucky, I think, to have her watch me grow up. She was able to come to my wedding and watch me compete in the Olympics, and it it meant a lot to me to share that with her, and mostly because it's thanks to her that I was able to compete for Greece in the Olympics, and I think that we had like a special bond for a lot of reasons, and that was one of them. And I thought about her a lot this past year because she passed away in the last year and a half or so. And then I had this experience in Greece where I went over there in February and thought I was going to be there for like a 3-week training camp before an Olympic qualifying race. And then everything shut down because Greece was right next to Italy and they were really responsible, I think, with COVID and shutting down right away. And I was, you know, stuck there for almost 5 months. And suddenly I adjusted to what it was like to really live in Greece. And I think that's when I felt most close to my grandmother, to my yaya, because until you really understand how someone grows up, it's hard to, it's it's an easier way to connect with someone, and I just feel like I know her better now, even though she wasn't alive during that time.
Makes sense. Yayas are pretty special.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, some people are really heavily immersed in their culture from birth, and others, like me, came to it later. How was it for you?
That's interesting. Well, I'm curious about that for you. When did you really start to explore it?
In college.
Yeah? Cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that for me, it was a part of my life in ways I didn't know since my mom passed away when I was 4, and that was because my dad raised me in the ways he knew how, and he was raised by such, you know, Greek parents on both sides, you know, spending a lot of time out there. And so I think it was deeply a part of me in ways that just weren't made clear to me. But my experience has been very much defined by my own, I think, like adding to that tradition through this Olympic experience and through my time that I've spent there on my own, which I think we can all, you know, agree that it's different to like, it's totally different to experience a place like with your family and through the lens of like something that isn't in your control, like whatever they're planning, you know, as a child um or as a one-off trip. But when you're like there on your own, like with your apartment, and it is totally different, right? It's like the difference between visiting New York City and living there, right? And so I think it's always been a part of my life, but I didn't have the reins of it until till you know the last 5 years or so.
Wow. So, what would you say being Greek means to you? Does it inspire you in your work or in your life?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's like it's more and more meaningful. The Olympic experience really shifted things for me because I think so often growing up, you know, I grew up in California and the Olympic dream really feels like my Olympic dream as an American. Like that just seems to be the general, you know, feeling and narrative about Olympic dream chasing is that it's like an individual dream. But when I competed for Greece, I understood that it was way more than my Olympic dream. It was our dream, and it meant so much to this country where the Olympics began that I felt like privileged and responsible for doing something for like a bigger purpose. And my race actually in Rio was first for all the track and field athletes. And they were like, it's time for you to set the tone. And I was like, oh, wow. Like that is, that really, it's about more than me. And I broke the Greek record, and it really did, I think, help my team. And it meant a lot to me because I understood how much it meant to like my community. And I think that is a uniquely Greek experience. And it's also why I'm now curious about the marathon, because that's just like another way to get to know my, you know, community and my culture, you know. And so it has meant more and more to me. And I love like it's so actually wild to think about, because I was there for so long this year, and then I kind of abruptly had to leave because COVID has been a really challenging, you know, unexpected thing for all of us. But I've missed it, and I feel like that is actually one of my homes now, and I haven't really felt that way before. And so this is a new feeling this year where I'm like, oh, I really miss one of my homes. It's like a, you know, I'm still absorbing it because I get these pangs where I just want to be there and have the routine I had. I mean, I really had a routine there, right? Like I knew where I was getting my food. I knew my neighbors. I knew how to get my laptop fixed. It's just like basic stuff where you're like, this is actually home now.
Sure. It calls to us in all different ways.
Yeah.
Was running in the Olympics always a goal for you?
You know, I think when my dad brought me to the 96 Olympics, which was in Atlanta, we were with my yaya and papu who lived in Atlanta at the time. That gave me like the seed of this would be so cool one day. And I got my Barbie dolls from the Olympics, and they were these gymnasts because 96 was like the year, you know, as many Olympic years are, but they had these Barbies. And so I think I had this like dream in my head, but I didn't think it was possible until like basically the end of college, when coaches that I admired and trusted were like, you could take this dream seriously. So I think there were like, you know, there's that seed of hope, and then there's the moment where you're like, I believe this is possible.
So when you made it to the Olympics, you competed for Greece instead of the United States. And I read that you did this to honor your yaya. Why was that important to you?
Well, I think, to be honest, I knew that me competing for Greece would have the most impact on a community. Like going back to that moment of feeling like, oh wow, I could be a role model here where there aren't as many. Like there are athletes in Greece, but there are not as many as in the US. Yes. And so I think it was one, this is how I can make a big impact. And two, like it was a really special connection between my grandmother and myself. And I don't have a mom, you know, or I don't have my mom, my birth mom. And so I've always really craved like that feeling that I assume little girls have with their mom, where it's like, this is my, I don't know, like, I don't really know what people think about their moms, but like, I assume it's some mixture of like best friend or number one guardian. I mean, mom is like, it's a relationship in and of themselves, but I didn't have it, right? And so this felt like a way to like connect with someone who was like a mom in a way, you know, to grandmom.
Right.
Right. And it felt really nice to have that. And it felt like more meaningful than any other way that I could connect with her. Right. So it was special. And I think it's also one of those things where relationships that we have like can grow even after death. So I feel that way about my own mom, that there's like an undulating relationship that I have with her based on my experience of the world. And I think it's similar with my yaya, where that relationship like lives on because she's given me a lot of opportunities by way of that citizenship, to be honest. She really has.
Now, you became a Greek citizen. Was that required for you to be on the Greek team?
Yes, yeah. You have to be a citizen.
Tell us a little bit about the Olympic experience. So training in Greece, wearing the uniform, all of that.
Yeah. Okay, so it's really fun. So when I would go over there to train, I've done it a few times, but before the Olympics, I was connected with like a team over there. So I had two boys that I trained with who were like my pre-Olympic training partners. And it was like my first time spending a significant amount of time with Greek people close to my age, right? And it was so fun because, you know, similar to those girls I saw at the track, these boys felt like they could be like my cousins. And I suddenly got to like have all this time together where we were really we were really emotional together, because when you're doing track workouts, there are good days and there are bad days, and you have to be there together. And then to take like that experience, they taught me a lot of very practical Greek, like not the kind you might learn, but the kind you might need.
Good
if you
words,
know what I
right?
mean. Right, yeah, exactly. And so then I go to the games and I have these roommates, and I lived with the marathon women, and that was very fun because I was suddenly with Greek distance runners, which I haven't, spent a ton of time with Greek distance runners. And it was really, it was like different and new because we could teach each other things about distance running. There's different mindsets in different places. And so that was fun. And then it was opening ceremonies, and we enter first. And that is amazing. I mean, you feel like you are a pop star, and you're walking into like some sort of outer space afterlife all at once. Like it's amazing. It's amazing. And it's emotional. And I remember I could not help but cry because it was so much representative of the culmination of so many lucky hard work moments and so many people's dreams. And it was special to be a part of the Greek team because you knew that this is a tradition that started here. So that was quite special. And then I will say, because I think people are curious about the difference between competing for the US and Greece, there was one very practical difference that I just wanted to share. So the American team had their own training facility on a base in Rio, out totally separate. So every athlete could go and be not around any other countrymen from other countries. But the Greek athletes, just like every other athlete on every other team, including Usain Bolt, who's the fastest man in the world, are all going to this one track to train. And it was so special because there I am, my friend who was a marathoner trying to train on this one track, while Usain Bolt and all these other people, like hundreds of us, all sharing this one track. And I think that really represents the Olympic spirit of friendship, fair play, camaraderie. And I wouldn't have had that experience if I was on a Navy base totally isolated. And it was amazing. It was amazing.
Let's take a step back for a moment and talk about, when did you start running?
I ran my first race when my dad ran his first and only marathon in Napa, California. And I was 8 years old, and it was a 5K, and I walked part of it, and my brother ran it with me. And I think that was really my dad's, that was something I think he did to like cope with my mom's death, to be honest. Like that's something I observed him do, was run. And then I started running in middle school on a team. And then in high school, I ran for a couple of years. I was very good, but I didn't love running, to be honest. I think it took finding a team and an environment that I also loved to really love the sport. And I think that's a fair assessment for anyone in any sport, where like you have to love the people you're around, and it has to feel positive. And in high school, the coaches really wanted me to quit every other activity and specialize. And that's like squeezing an ice cube too tight, like it's going to slip out. And it wasn't until college that I really found a team where I loved being around, and the coach that felt like nurturing. And that's where I started to love running.
Okay, so you competed for Greece in Rio in 2016, and you had every intention of competing in Tokyo last year, right? We all know what happened last year, and we talked a little bit about this. So you went to Greece to train in the early part of the year, and you got stuck there for 5 months. Tell us, what was that like?
Yeah. So normally when I go over there, I keep like my coach that I have here, and a coach over there will take over and proctor workouts, and I'll fold in with a team. But actually, when the lockdown happened, I knew that it wasn't smart and it didn't make any sense to try to like get workouts that I didn't know I could even execute, because roads and parks were changing, availability it was just so challenging. And so I actually switched coaches. And my coach is now just he's a Greek coach, Yanis Dagoglu. He's great. And he just became my coach. And so it actually had like a really profound effect on me. And then I started to learn from him, and he's really brilliant. And his athletes became my actual teammates. And I learned like a more European approach to the marathon, which is quite a good and different approach. There's just differences than I've experienced with US coaching of the marathon. And it really changed my life. It changed the way I train. And he's still my coach to this day. So I think it had a really profound effect on me, not to mention just my life was like in his hands. So it was like when he wanted to train and where I was going to train, it was all up to him. And like when I went to get, I don't know, I needed to like see a dentist at one point, and like he helped me find a dentist. So it was like I became his athlete, and he really took on the whole person. And I was so grateful for that.
Did you have to get permission to go out every time you trained?
Yeah. So Greek COVID quarantine rules at that time, which was, February, March, April, of 2020, were that you could not leave the house without a government issued permission slip and your ID. And there was a chunk of time when Olympic, pre-Olympic athletes could have permission to do whatever they needed to do. And then when the Olympics was postponed, there was a different set of rules. Like, so it was adjusting, but I had to run with a permission slip that I would like tuck in my hat or my sports bra, and my ID at all times. And it was, difficult at times, because we might go to a park and then realize that the rules had changed, and we understood that it was for the best of like the health of the country, but we needed to be constantly adapting. And actually what it meant was we spent quite a bit of time training in the Strophili National Forest, which is like the biggest forest in the Mediterranean, and it's right on the sea. And it was like a really safe place to train outside of Patras, which was the city where I lived. And it was just a mythical place. And we spent a lot more time there than we normally would have because of the lockdown.
So the Olympics have been rescheduled. Will you be competing this summer?
So I need to run a marathon. And so I'm training right now and hoping to compete in the late spring. So we're waiting, one, to figure out what marathons are available for athletes. And two, I need to run this time. And so for me, it's still a goal and a dream. And I just need to see what and when I can do it. There's time, but I got to do it.
Right. Now, you ran through college, and we'll come back to that a little bit later when we talk about the book. I wanted to know, how did you become interested in writing? You're a poet, you've written articles and screenplays. Where does that come from?
I think my interest in writing comes from, I think it almost predates my athletic passion in a way, or it happened at the same time, where like as a young girl, I enjoyed writing just as much as I enjoyed playing soccer on the soccer field. I like that in writing, I can dictate my own narrative. And I think that's something that I talk a lot about in Bravey, where we think the world is so objective. And even a sport like running, which has, you know, you finish in first, second, or third, and you finish with this time, I think it's pretty subjective. Like, I think that the way we see our performance and the way we present ourselves to the world, and also the narrative we tell ourselves, is far more important than what we perceive to be the objective truth about our results. And I think storytelling, whether it's writing these movies I make or acting or writing this book, is a way to like show through my words how we can reframe any experience in our favor, or to be more useful or more positive. And that was something I had to do because, you know, I lost my mom to suicide. It was hard. Like, I saw some really difficult stuff, but I still needed to feel like my world and my future was possible. And I think that storytelling, writing, and acting have allowed me to like express that in a different way than running, you know?
So how do you make all of these passions work together and combine them into the puzzle that's you?
Yeah. Well, first, I think that people who like see a multi-hyphenate person might imagine that they're doing all these things at once. And the truth is, I'm doing one thing at a time and just really good at trying to shift focus. So when I'm at practice, I'm truly at practice. And you know, sometimes I'll think about the film projects, but oftentimes I'm just socializing with my teammates, or I'm really focused on the moment of, you know, pain in a workout, and then to shift to the creative endeavor and end practice. I think that's kept me healthy as an athlete because we can't run 24 hours a day. So to shift focus, I think is an okay thing. And I think it's healthy too for Olympians to have something that they're doing in addition to their Olympic pursuit, because otherwise it can feel scary to know that we won't be doing this at this level forever. And I think by having this creative path, I've been able to like not have my ego tied up in my athletic performance, and thus I think I perform better. Like, it just feels more I don't know, I think they've just helped each other so much. Not sure if that answers your question.
Makes sense to me. Well, since we last connected, you got married. Tell us a little bit about your husband.
Yes. So Jeremy, I met Jeremy at Dartmouth. I met him at a party, and that's why I think that having a balanced life is okay. I mean, there was a time when I did not go to as many parties, but I met him when I was young. I met him, you know, my freshman spring at Dartmouth, and I did not want to have a boyfriend or date, and I don't think he wanted a girlfriend, but we had to date. And I think sometimes that happens where you're like, we've got to do this. And he is someone who, like, I really admire what he can do creatively, and it's different than my strengths. So we work together. We work together on our films. He's, you know, more of a director, but we write together. And I think it's a cool way to love somebody because we have these goals, and it's a different way to love somebody. It's sometimes hard, right, to like separate those lines and try to encourage each other, but not be critical in a way that's, you know, it can be hard, but I think it's hard in a good way. So he, you know, he's from the East Coast. He moved out to Eugene a few years after I did, and now we're in LA together, and we're living the dream.
Tell us a little bit about your films. Why do you want to make films?
Yeah, so the filmmaking came about because, so in college, I was really into poetry. And the thing I liked best about poetry was this like obsession with words. And it's what I liked most about writing my memoir too, because it felt like a real challenge to come up with the words to express what I had experienced. And the thing about poetry though is I felt it was great, but it felt isolating, and I really like teams. And so when I met Jeremy, he was really into filmmaking, and he kind of like pulled me over, and my love of words translated into love of dialogue in movies. and I loved to act, and I felt like the smartest way to be able to act was to write my own roles. And so I started doing that with him, and we have made 2 movies together. I actually co-wrote his first movie, so maybe it's 3. And all of them have played in Oregon, which is fun. Tracktown being the first one, and Olympic Dreams, the second one, which we made at the Winter Olympics with Nick Kroll. And I think the filmmaking is something that like I won't ever outgrow, and I'll always have a lot to learn. So I will continue to do that.
Great. Let's talk about Bravey. So I say bravo. You cover a lot in this book. Congratulations.
Thank you.
At first, one might think, why is a 30-year-old writing a memoir? But you've packed a whole lot of living and accomplishment into those 30 years. Why did you want to write a book?
Yeah, well, I think that there's only so much we can say on social media, and it can present a really fragmented view of somebody. And I know that my path was like much more circuitous than it might appear on social media. I also was aware that some of the things that I write on social media are these like lovely poems, and those poems are like the kite tail of like what is a really like challenging experience, I think. And I knew that this book could help people because I feel that I've been to like the highest highs in terms of like dream chasing, like to the Olympics and to some of the best film festivals in the world. But I've also experienced some of the lowest lows in terms of what I observed in my mom and what I experienced after the Olympics, which was like this post-Olympic depression that a lot of Olympians go through, and it's really normal. But I learned the hard way how to deal with it. And I think the vocabulary I learned was so compelling and saved my life. And I tried to share that in the book. And if I wrote it 10 years from now, I think I wouldn't have been as close to the experiences as I am now. And I'm glad that I wrote it now, which is the same reason why I'm glad I made Tracktown when I did, because I don't think I could make a movie about an Olympic hopeful in the same way as the moment after I was an Olympic hopeful, you know?
Yes, yes. Well, let's pause for a moment and explain for those of us, those that are watching tonight who don't know, what is a Bravey?
Yes. So a bravey came from a poem that I wrote, which was run like a bravey, sleep like a baby, dream like a crazy, replace can't with maybe. And the word bravey to me was kind of a response to this feeling I had growing up where I chased a lot of outward facing words like pretty and fierce and fast and all these words that I needed to present to the world. And bravey felt like a refreshing change where this word is really inward facing. It's a relationship that we have with ourselves, and it's choice. And I liked that idea that we could just decide that we were this thing. And so that's what a bravey is. And I like that it's something I feel like comfortable with people just imitating, you know? It's like it would have been useful for me when I was young.
So how did the book evolve?
The book evolved quite a bit. So it's it evolved in a number of ways. I mean, Maya Rudolph wrote the foreword, which I was really grateful for. And that added a piece to the book that didn't exist when I wrote it. I had, what, did you enjoy it?
Forward, yes.
She's great. I hope she writes more. That was great. But the book, so it has like an emotional arc rather than a straight narrative arc. And so what that meant in the writing process, it's written in essays, was that I was allowed to bounce around and write as I felt. And then at the end, we really like found the emotional arc. And that's why, you know, a story about my young childhood might come towards the end of the book. And what was most interesting to me was that there's a chapter called Depression, and I did not, you know, plan on writing that chapter. And it was because when I was writing this proposal, I had not yet healed from my own depression. And you know, it was the first time that I shared about it, except for with my doctors and my like immediate family, was when I wrote the chapter. And so that was the biggest, I think, like evolution of the book, was like that completed the story. I mean, I grew up my whole life wondering, like, will it happen to me? And is it an inevitable foregone conclusion that you have to die if you're depressed? Because that's what I observed, right? And what I learned is that it's actually not, you don't have to die. And it was sad to me to understand that my mom did not get great help. And so that, I think, is part of the book, is just helping provide some context as to why we can heal. And yeah.
And you met Maya Rudolph in Greece.
Yes, that's
Tell
true.
me about that.
Okay, so I was in Greece one time at Costa Navarino, which is a resort, and it's associated with the Westin hotel chain. And I was going to be in an advertisement for Westin, which is now in hotels all over the world. And that was fun. But the way I met her was I landed in Greece and got to this hotel at, you know, it was like 9 at night. I hadn't run in a couple days because of the travel. And I was like, Jeremy, turned to my husband, I was like, I really need to like just do a shakeout run or something. Because runners, we get antsy, okay? So we go to the gym, and the gym has this like big glass window that faces out. And there were these kids playing outside watching me because I look, you know, Olympic athletes look kind of maniacal on treadmills because we look like we're just sprinting at all speeds. And these kids were just playing, and I was like, who are these kids? And then this man popped out, and he was pointing at me, and it ended up being Paul Thomas Anderson, and his wife Maya Rudolph was there. And they were there completely separate for this film lab that takes place out there called Oxbelly. And we ended up, you know, getting to know them, and it was really special to me because it was very kismic to like meet her in this circumstance. But the reason why it was so meaningful to me was because Maya, she grew up sort of similar to me, losing her mom young and growing up with her dad and her brother. And for me, that was really special because, similar to going to Greece and seeing these girls that looked like they could be my siblings, meeting Maya felt familial in a way because we grew up in a similar, you know, it just felt, something felt similar. And it meant a lot to me to have like a mentor who I felt I could both look up to and also relate to.
I read the book, and honestly, I couldn't put it down. I felt like I was sitting with a friend and listening to her story. You're very open, and your candor is refreshing. You share these very intimate moments, good times, not so good times, and you're very vulnerable. Many people wouldn't have wanted or been willing to put that all out there. Why was that important to you?
Well, I think that the best stories are like, the most relatable stories are the ones that are the most specific. And it's almost harder to be vague, I think, than to just tell the truth. And so I just tried to go into as much detail as I felt was useful to show people what the moments were that I had to make decisions in my life. And that is not so that people imitate exactly what I did or where I'm going, but like to understand how I was thinking. Because I think that's the one thing you can give to people, is like helping them understand how you think and how you make decisions. And I hope that it gives people tools. And I hope it also, that level of detail and vulnerability gives people confidence to know that wherever they came from, they can go wherever they want to go, you know?
Well, I read about the pain of running. You write about that. I thought about the pain of writing, and it reminded me of a quote attributed to Ernest Hemingway. He says, "There is nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed." So is this where writing and running sort of intersect for you, and that they both entail some sort of physical bleeding or an emotional bleeding or pain?
Oh, I like that quote. Yeah, and I think that they're similar in that the pain, like we can change our view of the pain to be, more approach it like a sensation rather than a threat. And I feel like that quote like embodies just that. Where like he doesn't sound like offended by it. He sounds like he's like embraced what it is. And I think I've come to a similar relationship with pain myself.
There's a lot of great stuff in here for the younger reader. You wrote that running and winning came easy to you in middle school and in high school. And yet in your early college years, you were the worst on the team. You know, a lot of kids today are struggling with anxiety. Perhaps they don't feel they have a natural talent, or they have to work harder than a peer. We know that you went on to compete in the Olympics, and so you're a testament to the power of hard work and determination. What would you tell kids that are struggling in this area?
Yeah. Well, I would probably tell them that the good news and the bad news about not giving up is that it works. And that is like a really hard pill to swallow sometimes because, man, I think, and I wrote this, but I like keep thinking about this, that it hurts to know we can do it. And I know that maybe some of the kids you're talking about are like, I don't know if I can do it. And I'm like, well, you have to be humble enough to know that you will never know your future. Like, if you think you know the future, then like maybe just like you just don't. And so that all we can do is control, like, that we try our best is like, it's the only thing we can ask of ourselves. And I think that I have come to that realization, and it's all I ask of myself, and it's all I've ever asked of myself. But I think what we find when we give ourselves the chance to try our best is that we outgrow our expectations and we do make progress if we're not so stunted by the idea that it might be impossible. Like, we just have to forget the future and what might happen or not happen, like, because we can't know and we can't control that, but we can just like consistently try our best. And the last thing, sorry, I think also just like trying your best means different things every day, right? Like, you could feel crappy one day and then you just give your best of crap, and it's just gonna look different day to day, right?
Yes, yes. Now, you wrote a lot about losing your mother, and you wrote about observing other mothers and how still other mothers tried in some way to try to compensate you for not growing up with yours. I grew up with my mom, and my mom was not the typical Greek mom, and I wanted her to be that way. So as I read, I started wondering, was I trying to be what I wanted my mom to be for me? Or was I the kind of mom that my girls want in me? So I actually asked them.
Oh, really?
It was a pretty interesting conversation. Did you ever think that your words might stimulate these kinds of conversations?
No, but that's amazing. And can you tell me what they said? I'm just wondering, really. Or
They said,
how did you feel? If you want to just speak for yourself.
well, basically they told me I was a little too strict, but otherwise they said I was doing a good job. So that was nice, but it really made me stop to think and reflect about the kind of parent that I am.
Yeah, it's a lot of parenting.
Yeah, what's next for you? I've heard something about a TV show and maybe another film.
Yeah. So I am working on my first TV show, which is really, really exciting. And it's a first because it's almost like changing events in running, where I've run the 10K and now I'm trying the marathon. And I think it's similar with like movies to television, where it's like similar but different, right? So I'm learning a lot. I also have another movie that I am working on, and that's really exciting. Some of the emotional cores that I explore in Bravey will be in this movie. So the show is in the sports world, the movies are not in the sports world. So that'll be an interesting, transition and shift. And of course, the book, like, I just really hope, like, look, I know I'm not famous like Matthew McConaughey, but I love his book, by the way, but I think this book can make a big difference, and I just hope it finds people who might connect with it.
Right. Will you write another book?
We'll see. I don't know what, I mean, it would be an honor to write another book. It would be fun to explore. I think there's like a few ideas that could be fun to explore, but we'll see what the world is demanding, you know?
Maybe fiction?
Yeah, that could be really fun, right? I mean, those types of books I remember making an impact on me growing up, so that would be a fun thing to try.
All right. Well, let's take some questions from the audience. Let's see what we've got here. Nicholas would like to know, which part of roads is your family connected with?
Mm-hmm.
And what are your impressions of track and field training infrastructure in Greece and roads?
Yeah, so my family, both my yaya and my papu are from Rhodes, and that's how they met, you know, actually. And I believe my yaya's family, it's like, it has changed names. So like, I want to say Ialisos, but I don't know if that's like the current name or the name when she grew up. Like a fondue, like one of them is like the old name and one is the new name. And so that's what I know about that. And as far as the track and field question, so what's interesting to me is that some athletes will go through the NCAA system as Greek athletes. They'll come over here and do that, and some athletes won't. And the ones that don't, I think it's really interesting because they'll stick with a coach through, you know, their teenage years, through like what we might consider, you know, our NCAA experience and beyond. And I think that's really interesting because sometimes changing coaches is good, but sometimes there's something to be said about someone who knew you when you were young. And not to get too into details here, but I think in speaking with my Greek coach that there might have been more patience for me going through puberty, for example, had I had a coach who knew he was going to be my coach beyond me going through puberty. So like, I know my coach, some of his athletes, one of my teammates has a younger sister and she's like going through puberty and he's really patient with her. And I think that some coaches can rush the process and encourage athletes to do too much mileage too young. And what's cool about the Greek system, if someone decides to stay with a coach, for example, is if that coach understands that the female athlete is going to be more capable than like the prepubescent athlete, then he will just like be with her and like let her body develop. And I think that's really positive. There's more like detailed, you know, as far as what the training, the differences and stuff. And those, you know, there were some nuances that were really specific to running, but I think overall, I think that philosophy was interesting. You know, it's just different. It's different.
Interesting.
So.
Nicholas also asks about the folk dance festival. This is a big deal on the West Coast, and he's asking if you participated or attended the folk dance festival when you were younger.
So I'm not sure what the folk dance festival is, to be honest.
It's all about Greek dance.
Well, so I did Greek dance when I was younger at the Greek Orthodox Church in Oakland, California. That's also where my dad eventually, when I turned 29, got remarried. And so I did that when I was younger. One thing that I did experience when I went to Greece, and I thought this is what he was asking about, was carnival, which I did not know existed. But this is like in Europe, there are carnivals in different places, and Patras has like one, I think it's like the second biggest.
It's huge. Yeah.
It's huge. And so that was the day before the lockdown. And it was like limited because of COVID, but it happened because it was like right before the lockdown. And that was super fun. I mean, it was like I was experiencing, you know, like just like 20-something-year-olds in the street. And I felt like that was like a good welcome to Greece. So that was something that I hope I get to go back and experience when it's post-COVID times, you know?
Awesome. Maria would like to know, can you tell us a bit more about how marathon training is going?
Yeah. So marathon training is going well. I learned from this Greek coach an addition to my program, which are drills. Drills are, I mean, I did drills growing up. I did them in college, but I kind of had a period of time where I didn't do them. And he is really into drills. And so that's been a new addition to my program. It's good. Like before the Rio Olympics, I had a team in Oregon that I trained with. And since moving to LA, I'm more dictating my own like training partners. And I think that's actually been a good shift for me because I think there's a time and a place to like meet a team every day. And I enjoy that, especially when I go to altitude camps. I was in Boulder in December training at altitude, but I like having a little bit of freedom here to like choose when I'm going to run and sleep a little bit more if I need to. So it's going well. And, we're looking at spring marathons, which like, it sounds like there's going to be some races in the spring. So it's good. I feel like I understand the event more, which is something that I guess everybody has to learn when they become a marathoner.
Sure. Another question, Helen says, Alexi is so authentic and her self-awareness is profound. Her leadership qualities are evident and is a true mentor. Her life experiences and the lessons she has learned can benefit so many.
Thank you, Helen. Can you be my Bravey spokeswoman? Can you just like take this and run with it?
For sure.
Oh my
One more question. Did the church and church associated life play a role in how you coped and learned to cope with pain?
That's a great question. So I'll put this back. Okay, so growing up, if I'm being really honest, it was challenging for me because the church was in Greek and my dad spoke English back to my grandparents when they spoke Greek to him. And I think this is a thing that it's the one thing that I wish that he did differently. Like one thing is just, I wish he had spoken Greek to me more. So when I went to church growing up, I didn't understand what was going on. I think I understood when I was in my Greek classes, I understood my classmates. But I think the bigger like contributor to my understanding of pain has come in like my more adult life. So my teammates and my coach in Greece, like were religious, and my coach showed me, is it St. Anthony's? Like the biggest Greek Orthodox church in Greece is in Patras. And it was something that we drove by every day and he talked about. And I think like I didn't, to be honest, grow up with my dad talking about it either. And my dad's become more like openly, I think, Greek Orthodox in the more recent years. But I feel like it was more a part of discussion when I was in Greece. So that's the honest answer of like, I didn't understand what was going on when I was growing up, and now I understand a little bit more.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone should read Bravey. Alexi is very frank about her post-Olympic depression, which I think is very critical in these current times. She's very open about losing her mom and all the challenges that she's faced. I've always said life begins at 30, but I can't wait to see now, Alexi, where your life leads you.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm almost 1 year old then. So that's so encouraging. And I feel that way too. I feel that this book is the end of the beginning of my life. And I really appreciate being here with you. And I just, I will see you.
Everybody pick up a copy of Bravey.
Yeah. Everybody get it. Support your local bookstore. There's the Portland community. I don't know if everyone's in Portland or not, but I hope you all support whatever bookstore that you're most loyal to.
So yeah, our local book selling partner is Annie Bloom's Books. And then of course there are a number of, the famous one I think everybody knows of in Portland is Powell's. But there are a number of other local bookstores that you can grab Bravey from now. It's out now. So make sure that you go out and get your copy of Bravey today. well, I guess if you go online, you can do it tonight.
Online and do it. Well, thank you, Alexi. Thank you, Brandon, and the Hellenic-American Cultural Center and Museum. This was so much fun. I hope everybody has had just as much fun as I had. And I'd like to invite you all to visit my website, mariakaramitsos.com. Sign up for my monthly newsletter, and you'll get sneak peeks at my novel in progress, all my latest news, and access to giveaways and promotions. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and check the latest issue of Neo Magazine for my most current articles. Stay well, stay strong. Have a great night, everyone. Kalimikta.
Kalimikta.
Thank you both so much. If you ever come through Portland, make sure that you stop by the museum and let us know you're coming.
I will be going to Portland because I love Portland.
Oh, good.
Thank you. Thank you
Hi,
all.
everybody. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And again, it's I believe, Alexi, your website is just your name, alexipappas.com as well. And of course, our website is HellenicAmericanCC.org, and you can support programs like this by going to HellenicAmericanCC.org/donate.
Amazing. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed Brandy, and thank you so much, Maria. And thank you, Brandon.
Thank you both. Have a wonderful night.
You too.